So I want to do a video on priming and sanding and filling. Some 3D printed pieces here that I've cut up. First thing you want to do once you have gotten your 3D print part, or any parts you're finishing, I like to go ahead and do a sand. So for these, they're pretty heavily stair-stepped from the printing process. I came in with 150, and then I stepped down to 220 and sanded as much as I felt like I could. And at that point, I like to shoot a coat of a sandable primer on there. And once you do, a lot of the imperfections show up so that you can kind of see what you need to, at that point, fill in. So what we recommend for safety is just a wall spackle paste. A lot safer than using the true automotive spot fillers. So as you can see, there's some imperfections through here. You want to just come in and put in real thin coats. It does shrink slightly, so it isn't bad to leave just a little bit standing proud, but you don't want to just leave a big, like you're taking a cake and icing it. You don't want to have a lot that you have to take off, so do keep it kind of thin as you're working. And try to just put it in those areas where you are seeing imperfections that need to be cleaned up. A lot of these smaller little lines that are hardly visible will disappear in the first sanding of the primer out. So initially there are a lot of facets that are in the 3D printed part. That's where the 150 was able to come in and knock a lot of that out. So always cap your product so it doesn't dry out. So once that dries for a little bit, I would come back in with 220. Note that pieces, you're gonna hold the sandpaper and kind of cup them so that they form to the surface. If you have flat planes that you're trying to sand, you'd want to use a sanding block for that. But for round surfaces, convex, concave, you want to be able to cup or be able to scoop and sand into those areas. So after your spackle there, you want to be able to see that you have left just those areas filled now with the spackle. So the next step, you come back in and hit it with another coat of your sandable primer. The one I'm using is this Rust-Oleum. I do like the automotive sandable primer. There are other sandable primers out there. Make sure it does say on the can that it is sandable. If it's not, this one says wet sandable. There's no need for us in our model making to actually wet sand, but it does work better than, there's a 2X product that I do not like. It stays wet a lot longer. This one even says on the can that it is fast drying. So this is one I would recommend. Once you've sprayed that second coat now, you can see that the imperfections, there's still some there. And from there, we can jump from the 220 to a piece of 320. So always just kind of keep your material clean. And as we sand, we'll cup and try to sand the surface. And I like the kind of light gray primer that you see here, because I'm able to, as I'm sanding, I can see the dark areas that are the low spots that I need to sand a little bit further to eliminate those. And so at this point, we're using the primer as our filler. And so we can keep coming in and just sanding down. At this stage, we don't really want to pierce back through to the white original material. If you do in a spot here or there, it may be fine, but typically you're not sanding that far. But as you are, you're trying to remove any of those darker gray areas. There's a few here as well, okay? So those are curved surfaces. Typically 320 and priming is all you need. You can, if you need to, sometimes with silvers and certain colors, you want to go to a 400 grit. That's about as far as you want to go with your sanding. You don't need to go beyond 400 grit. Real quickly, making sanding blocks. Now these would only want to be used when sanding flats. So that way you can generate and create a nice surface flat by using a block. Same with sanding flat surfaces, but beyond that, you will, on curved surfaces, always be kind of cupping the paper to fit what you need. So for some weird shapes, you can take your sandpaper and break it over an edge of a table. That allows you to roll it up. So say you had internal cavities that you needed to sand, that would be a quick way of making that tool. You can keep kind of diagonally, and then that's going to allow you to kind of start creating a sandpaper that will fit down into this concave shape. And you can come in and use your finger and sand in that manner. So once that gets, and that's the second coat of primer, this one was done. Sometimes you may find imperfections in this. If you have time, it's always best to let this sit for an extended period before painting, because sometimes the spackle materials can shrink for you. So come back in if you need to. This is where I might step up to that 400 or again with a 320 and just come in and lightly sand away any of the dry spray that we might have in areas, and prepare that for actual paint. Okay?